A long time ago, the world was smack in the middle of a war between humans and monsters. By the end, nobody even remembered why they were fighting in the first place, so they decided to chill out and make peace. Many years later, there are two doctors who specialize in treating monster girls. Dr. Glenn, a human, and his half-snake, half-human assistant, Safi. They're both super skilled and dedicated to their work, but Dr. Glenn is kinda sus. He's way too obsessed with his patients' health and doesn't care about their modesty. He'll do whatever it takes to cure them, even if it means touching them inappropriately or exposing them in public. Like, for example, one time he was touching this woman's watermelon. Safi is not happy with Dr. Glenn's behavior. She's got a major crush on him and gets jealous when he gets close to other monster girls. One day, they get a letter from Dr. Cthulhu, a half-human, half-octopus monster girl who's also a famous doctor. She asks them to go to the arena and check on her patients while she's away. Glenn is stoked to help his teacher, but Safi is worried. She knows that the arena is full of cute monster girls who might catch Dr. Glenn's eye, and she's right. One of the patients is Tissalia Scythia, a centaur who's the only daughter of Scythia transportation. Glenn examines Tissalia and finds out that she's actually completely healthy and fine. He tells her to go and moves on to his other patients, but at the end of the day, as they're about to leave, Glenn is stopped by two of Tissalia's assistants, Kay and Rona. They're worried and tell him that something must be wrong with Tissalia because she's been losing every match in the arena for the last month. They say that she's super talented and hard-working, so it doesn't make sense for her to lose so much. Glenn, however, is confident in his diagnosis and says that Tissalia is okay, but to make sure, he decides to watch one of her matches. The girl loses again, this time to a cat girl, and Glenn finally sees what the problem is. That night, as Tissalia is training for the next match, Glenn and his two assistants confront Tissalia and capture her. Safi holds down the centaur princess in a really awkward and inappropriate way. Glenn puts iron horseshoes on Tissalia's feet. She had been too proud of her royal blood and had refused to wear iron horseshoes, which is why she was losing her balance and her matches. Tissalia is mad at them for interfering, but the next day she wins a match in the arena after losing 10 times in a row. We then go back in time to a flashback during the war. Safi was taken hostage by Glenn's family so that her family wouldn't betray the humans. During that time, they became close friends until the war ended and she went back to her home. Many years later, they met again at the same medical school and became friends again. Next, Glenn and Safi go shopping in the Merrow Waterways, a city built by the dragon lady Skadi. Safi is happy that they are shopping together because she can seduce Glenn, but the boy just sees this as a quick trip to get some supplies. As they reach their destination, a mermaid lady calls them a cute couple and invites them to her place. Safi gets overwhelmed and drags Glenn to the mermaid. The mermaid, Lulala, is a singer who sings for lovers and money, especially lovers. Glenn senses something fishy and asks for a song, but he only pays her 2 copper coins instead of 3. He offers her a free checkup as the 3rd coin, as he expected. The girl can't finish the song and starts coughing. It turns out that she has a disease. Glenn examines her and sees blisters in her mouth. He then checks her gills with his bare hands instead of using tools, because why not? Glenn discovers that Lulala spent way too much time out of the water, which caused her gills to inflame and her voice to suffer. Lulala tells them that she had to work 12 hours a day because her father left her family and she had no money. Suddenly, a young boy falls into the river and interrupts their conversation. Lulala jumps in to save him, but she is completely exhausted when she gets out. As the doctors perform CPR on the boy, Lulala falls into the water again, but this time, the mermaid starts drowning in the water. Glenn sees this and dives in to save Lulala. He performs mouth-to-mouth to force air into her lungs, which makes her gills work again. Safi uses her long tail to drag them out of the water, therefore saving both of them. A few days later, Lulala is totally fine. She scored a new gig at the City Hall in Merrow Waterways, singing her heart out and earning enough dough to support her family. After all the necessary touching Glenn had done, Lulala developed a major crush on him. Meanwhile, in Merrow Waterways, a woman is on a mission to bust some crooks in the city. She chases after them like a maniac, but gets caught in their trap. The next day, Glenn and Safi are busy treating a slime girl who's literally too hot to handle. They get a visit from Lady Skadi and her bodyguard Kunai. Skadi's a dragon-human hybrid, and Kunai's a human golem made from spare human parts, like a Frankenstein wannabe. Since Skadi's voice is like a whisper, Kunai does all the talking for her. She tells them she lost an arm in a brawl last night and wants them to find it and stitch it back on. Skadi drags her away, but Kunai doesn't want Glenn's help. She's got a bad history with doctors who screwed her up more than they fixed her. She hates doctors with a passion, except for Safi, who she thinks is cool. She tells Glenn to buzz off and says she'll find her arm by herself. She heads back to the streets and spots the same crooks who took her arm. She decides to tail them, but she falls for their trap again. Glenn is determined to help Kunai, so he goes on a quest to find her arm. He bumps into Tessalia, who found Kunai's leg. He examines the leg and sees that the stitches are amateurish. He wonders if the people who created Kunai were even doctors or just some random dudes with a sewing kit. He ventures deeper into the city and runs into Lulala, who has Kunai's arm. She hands it over to him and tells him he can use the limbs to track Kunai's location. Meanwhile, Kunai crawls to a wall and curses her luck. She's missing an arm and a leg, but that's not the worst part. She can still hear the voices of all the people whose body parts were used to make her, so she's basically a human radio. Glenn finds her and offers to help her, but she tells him to take a hike. He ignores her, puts on his glasses, and goes full doctor mode. He fixes her arm and leg and connects all the blood vessels properly. He tells her that this might stop the voices in her head since she'll feel more connected to her body parts. He also makes her feel some other things, if you know what I mean. She thanks him even though she still hates doctors. The girl thinks Glenn is different from the rest. Back at the clinic, Safi gets a harpy egg from one of her mates. She tries to prank Glenn by telling him she's pregnant, but he's not fooled since he knows snakes lay eggs. Safi shows him the abandoned harpy egg that her friend found on the street. Glenn checks the egg and sees that it's not fertilized, so it's just a big omelet waiting to happen. Outside, some bandits show up and attack the clinic from the front door. The bandits are all human, so Safi beats them up just as easily as she beats Glenn. More bandits show up, so the doctors run outside and meet Kunai. She tells them that the bandits are slavers who kidnap harpies and force them to lay eggs, which they sell to the highest bidders on the black market. The doctors ask for help from the city council, but they're all busy with their own mission to stop the slavers, so the two are forced to join Kunai on the mission. Skadi and Lulala join them as well. Out of nowhere, they get attacked by archers, but Tessalia saves them with her horse powers. Kunai and Tessalia fight the bandits outside, while the doctors go inside with Skadi. They find the harpies that were captured by the bandits. They're all okay except for one harpy who has a stuck egg and is in severe pain. Glenn gets to work and tries to help the harpy deliver the egg safely. Safi fights the bandits and remembers her past. Her own family wanted her to spy on Glenn's family, and also kill the family if the deal with the humans went bad. The egg comes out just fine, but Safi gets stabbed by a poison knife. She falls asleep in the middle of the fight. But she wakes up soon though, because the slavers used weak poison. Glenn tells her that the slavers were caught, and the harpy laid her egg safely. Knowing that everything worked out, Safi decides to tell Glenn the truth about her past, but he says he already knew everything. His family did some digging on her when she came to their place. They knew she was there to kill them, but Glenn still wanted to be her friend. Safi is so happy that she uses her tail to tie his arms and legs together, which puts him in a suspicious position. But before she can do anything sus, she falls asleep again. The following day, the two doctors go to the Harpy village to help the locals there. Tessalia pulls their carriage through the mountains when suddenly a rock slide happens. Kay and Rona save Tessalia from being harmed, but Kay gets hurt and can't walk anymore. Some male harpies show up and fly Kay to their village like some real bros. The rest of the group follows them. Glenn finally examines Kay's wound at the village and discovers it's just a mild sprain that needs some rest to heal. But Glenn has no time to relax as he has to help many villagers with various problems at the makeshift clinic. After a long day of work, Glenn steps outside for a breath of fresh air and runs into Rona, who looks lost. She explains that she came with Tessalia, but her mistress is busy. Kay's injury has made Rona very anxious, and she almost messed up Tessalia's deal. Tessalia notices Rona's anxiety and asks Glenn to check on her. Glenn is puzzled as Rona has no physical symptoms, but rather a mental issue. Safi suggests that Rona might have a submissive personality and needs to be restrained to feel calm and secure. Glenn then tries a forbidden and ancient move. He binds and blindfolds Rona. To his surprise, Rona feels much better as she can concentrate on her work. Glenn wonders if Rona just likes being tied up. As a reward, Kay and Rona offer to please Glenn together. They tell him that their mistress wants to marry him and that they would also belong to him if she did. They ignore all limits and try to persuade Glenn to get busy with them. But Glenn overcomes his demons and firmly rejects them. I see that Glenn is only interested in trying them out, not marrying them. Kay and Rona still hope that Glenn will become their master someday. The group goes to see Illy, the harpy who had been Glenn's patient when they were captured by the bandits. Illy had avoided Glenn's treatment in his makeshift clinic, so he decided to visit her at her home. Illy has lost her ability to fly after the bandit incident, which has shattered her self-esteem. Glenn examines her again and uses his sixth sense to take her temperature and pulse with his bare hands. I wonder what those hands can do. He discovers that Illy isn't sick at all. She was just losing her feathers so that she could grow new ones. Illy is furious with Glenn's diagnosis. She refuses to believe that her flightlessness was caused by some missing feathers. She runs out of the house in a rage. Tessalia follows her and finds out that Illy wanted to be a gladiator like her and fight in the arena. Illy challenges Tessalia to a duel, but she is no match for the seasoned fighter. Tessalia grabs one of Illy's feathers during the fight, which she gives to Glenn. Glenn realizes what the problem is and collects all of Illy's fallen feathers around the town and rushes to find her. Glenn tells Illy that she is molting, but not in a normal way. Illy has phoenix blood in her veins, so she is replacing her old feathers with new ones that have phoenix properties. A few days later, Illy proves Glenn right by flying with her new rainbow wings. Glenn touches one of her feathers and feels its heat. He wonders how much of a phoenix Illy really is. Glenn and Safi also give the harpies some tips on how to care for their wings and claws when they are about to leave. Some harpies come in soaked and covered in a white, creamy, and tasty liquid. It turns out to be spider silk, and it is everywhere in the forest. While exploring, they meet Aranya, a spider woman who is a famous dressmaker and Safi's best friend. Aranya says she wants to catch Illy and see her rainbow wings, but when she hears that there are many harpies in the village, she is overjoyed and follows Glenn and Safi there. In the village, Aranya meets Illy and begs her to let her touch her feathers. She says that she just wants to stroke her feathers, just one little stroke, or perhaps a small squeeze, nothing more. The next day, the girls head to the hot springs, hoping it'll help Safi feel better. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Aranya spots Glenn all alone and seizes the chance to hit him up. She lures him deep into the forest and traps him in her web, hoping to make him her main squeeze and get closer to Safi. Aranya starts laying it on thick, but Tessalia appears out of nowhere and saves Glenn from the web. Aranya tries to claim she and Tessalia are the same, both wanting Glenn, but Tessalia shuts her down, saying she loves Glenn for real and isn't a jerk like her. They're about to throw down, but Safi shows up and scolds her friends before whisking Glenn away. Back at the clinic, Safi and Glenn chill with some drinks. Safi pours her heart out, confessing her love for Glenn. She says he doesn't have to return her feelings since she knows he's got a wandering eye, but then they hear some loud racket outside. They head out with the rest of the village and see the giant goddess Giga stomping their way. They're clueless about why she's so mad and ready to meet their maker, but Tesla ain't having it. She leads them out of town to safety. Illy, the fastest flyer, jets off to Glenn's town to talk to Lady Scotty. Glenn and the others pack their bags and plan to ditch town before the goddess gets any closer, but they realize Tessalia's missing. The brave centaur takes it upon herself to confront the giant goddess. Tessalia figures if she slays a goddess, Glenn will have to marry her. Safi and Glenn catch up to her and try to talk some sense into her, but then the giant sneezes so hard the whole forest shakes. She introduces herself as Dione and says she came to the village because she heard there was a doctor who could cure her cold. Glenn checks her out and realizes she's got a simple cold. He gives her some meds and asks Aranya to whip up some warm clothes so she doesn't have to freeze in the buff. Glenn finishes up with the goddess and heads home. He reopens his clinic and meets Tessalia for dinner. Unsurprisingly, Tessalia thinks it's a date and tells him how she was ready to die for him, but then Safi shows up and crashes the party. Can someone in the comments spill the beans on this guy's secret? The next day, the whole gang heads to the Marrow waterways for the ceremony. Glenn, though, notices something's off with Scotty's tail. Scotty's giving her speech, but she suddenly faints in front of everyone. After that, they took her to the central hospital. Glenn and Safi anxiously await news about Lady Scotty's health. After a harrowing night, where Glenn had to administer first aid, they were left in the dark, unable to access her medical records. Dr. Cthulhu, Scotty's primary physician, held all the cards. Upon knocking on Dr. Cthulhu's door, they are greeted by a flurry of joyous tentacles wrapping around Glenn. Safi, not one to mince words, calls out Cthulhu for her unprofessional behavior. Cthulhu, unfazed, gently places Glenn back on the ground, her obsession with younger men a well-known fact. Safi's jealousy is palpable, but the conversation quickly turns serious as they discuss Scotty's condition. Dr. Cthulhu reveals that Scotty suffers from an extremely rare disease, one that has spread throughout her body, causing extreme spikes in her blood pressure. The fact that Scotty has never fainted in public is nothing short of a miracle. Treating dragons is no easy feat. They are stronger and more resilient than other monsters, and the root cause of Scotty's illness remains a mystery. Back at their clinic, Glenn stitches Kunai's hand and learns about Scotty's refusal to be treated. Despite Dr. Cthulhu respecting her wishes, Kunai believes Scotty needs treatment, even if it means going against her will. Glenn agrees to examine Scotty, but it would require a thorough examination, even if it means entering her bedroom. Safi, upon hearing the word bedroom, drops the bowl she was holding, but Glenn reassures her, explaining that he has examined patients in their homes before. In Scotty's room, Glenn finds her gazing out of the window. She allows him to examine her, but doubts he can cure her. She reveals a blue-colored heart beating from her chest, a cancerous tumor attached to most of her veins. She believes it's her fate, as dragons were not meant for Earth. Their ancestors suffered in the war, losing limbs and becoming half-humans like her. The past bloodshed has led to the current generation paying the price for their ancestors' sins. Despite Scotty's beliefs, Glenn is determined to find a medical solution. He begins the examination, touching her scales and tail and examining her wings. Scotty becomes emotional, causing her to cry. Hearing that, Kunai rushes into the room, finding Scotty in a questionable state on the floor. This angers Safi, but Scotty calms them down and announces that she's going to bed. The next morning, Safi and Glenn visit Dr. Cthulhu, seeking her assistance with Lady Scotty's surgery. They propose a plan to disconnect veins from Scotty's tumor heart to her real heart, a complex procedure that requires many skilled hands. And Cthulhu's tentacles make her the best fit for the task. Glenn and Safi are met with a harsh reality. Dr. Cthulhu, the primary physician for Lady Scotty, refuses to perform the surgery, calling Glenn naive for thinking it would be that simple. But Glenn, fueled by determination, manages to convince Cthulhu that she wants to save Scotty more than anyone else. This recognition fills Cthulhu with pride for her students, and she wraps them both in her tentacles in a rare moment of affection. Despite their progress, they face another hurdle. They need another skilled doctor to match their speed for the surgery. Glenn suggests Arania, known for her sewing skills and needlework. They visit Arania's clothing factory, but she initially refuses due to concerns about her brand's reputation if the surgery fails. However, Safi convinces her by promising she'll get to wear a nurse uniform. Meanwhile, at Scotty's room, Kunai tries to convince her to undergo surgery, but Scotty remains firm in her decision, stating that she has accepted her fate. Glenn visits the medical instruments workshop and meets Meme, a one-eyed monster. He asks her to take him to the boss, and she agrees, but faces difficulties with depth perception as she's a cyclops. Along the way, she accidentally tears her clothes and gets shy. Eventually, they reach the boss, and Glenn explains that he needs equipment for a significant surgery by the end of the month. The boss agrees to the task, but warns that it will require a considerable amount of time and money. Moreover, he cannot guarantee that they can create needles that can pierce a dragon's scales. Glenn, however, expresses his trust in them. Meme is assigned to make the needles, but she refuses due to the possible consequences if the surgery fails. Eventually, she agrees, seeing that Glenn truly believes in her. Back at the clinic, Arania stitches up Kunai, but she asks Safi for some booze, feeling tired from work. However, Safi refuses to give her any booze until the surgery is done. Kunai explains that she tried to convince Skadi to undergo the surgery, but Skadi believes it's time for her to kick the bucket. Skadi hated the war between dragons and humans, and felt her purpose was to build a city where monsters and humans could live together. With Lindworm's growth, she thinks her mission has been fulfilled. Glenn offers to accompany Kunai next time they talk to Skadi, but Arania suggests a different approach. Instead of repeating the same words, they need to find a new way to convince her. Later, Dr. Cthulhu and Glenn visit the workshop to see the prototype for the surgical instruments, and Cthulhu approves of them. However, the needles are unfinished, but the boss wants Meme to work on them without interference. Glenn thinks about his first major surgery and admires Cthulhu for being an excellent teacher despite being very harsh on her students. Meme works day and night tirelessly at the shop, determined to create the perfect tool for Skadi's surgery. One day, Illy urgently notifies Glenn that Meme has collapsed at the workshop. Glenn rushes to the workshop and suspects Meme might have a heat stroke. He advises moving her to a cooler place, but Meme in her weakened state insists on making the needles. She reveals that the workshop used to make weapons for wars, causing bloodshed. However, when Lady Skadi took over, she transformed the workshop to produce medical instruments that save lives instead. Meme was inspired by Skadi's actions and had been waiting for the day she could do something important for her. She passes out, and when she wakes up, she finds herself in Glenn's clinic. Meanwhile, Meme, a one-eyed monster, is hard at work in the workshop. Despite being a cyclops and prone to motion sickness, she's so focused on creating the perfect needles for Skadi's surgery that she gets dizzy from the intense concentration. She invites Glenn and Arania to see the fruits of her labor, sturdy steel wires cut into pieces for efficient mass production of needles. While these steel needles will require replacement after every 10 stitches due to their hardness, they are perfect for the surgery. Everyone is amazed by Meme's incredible work, and even her boss is moved to tears. Glenn expresses his gratitude to Meme for her dedication and praises her for the fantastic job she has done. The next morning, as Glenn prepares to leave his clinic, he takes off the dragon scale he attached to his bag and gives them to Safi, asking her to put them in his room as he cannot risk offending Skadi with them. He leaves the clinic, ready to convince Skadi to undergo the surgery. Glenn meets Skadi after the council meeting and tries to convince her to undergo the surgery. He returns to the clinic and praises Arania for her improved stitching skills, which makes Safi jealous. Safi reminds him that he still has to go to Dr. Cthulhu and the workshop, prompting Glenn to rush out as he is already late. Arania tells Safi that trying to keep Glenn away from other women won't make him notice her. However, Safi believes that Glenn will always return to her if she waits. Later that night, Safi, Arania, and Tissalia go out for dinner. Arania asks why Tissalia was invited, and Safi explains it's a girls' night. Tissalia asks if the ingredients she provided were helpful, and Safi reveals that Tissalia obtained herbs and ingredients from humans in the East to help Lady Skadi's surgery. Since no surgery has been performed on dragons, they are still determining if the anesthetic will work on Skadi. They are at the bar because their first anesthetic is alcohol from the East. As the night progresses, Arania gets drunk and playfully ties a red thread to the pinkies of Tissalia and Safi, declaring them best friends for life. After returning from the bar, Safi catches Arania attempting to steal the dragon scales she had given to Glenn. She confronts Arania, expressing her disappointment, stating that she can tolerate harmless pranks but not stealing. Arania panics, tosses the scales away, and tries to escape through the window. However, Tissalia is outside and blocks one exit, while Safi stands at the other, preventing Arania from leaving. Unable to escape, Arania surrenders. Back inside, Safi talks to Arania, understanding that they have been asking a lot from her, which has caused stress and triggered her old habit of stealing. Arania admits that the closer she gets to someone, the more possessive she becomes of their belongings. Safi points out that it's not just about stealing the scales. Arania also tested their friendship by trying to take Glenn away from her.
Safi reassures Arania that she wants to be with her and believes in their friendship, and Thessalia adds that they should trust the bonds they share.
This makes Arania emotional. Arania confesses that she was stealing the scales to test Glenn. She is confused by his kindness and how he continues to teach her despite the suspicious things she's done to him. Arania confesses that she finds it hard to unwind around Glenn and playfully hints at her desire to share her unique abilities with him. Safi, ever the tease, probes Arania about her feelings for Glenn. Caught off guard, Arania unwittingly discloses that she often thinks of him before drifting off to sleep, and how his presence makes her feel warm and fuzzy inside. The revelation sparks a round of laughter, as they all realize that Arania has fallen for Glenn. Meanwhile, Glenn pays a visit to Scotty, who requests to be lifted up to enjoy the city view from his arms. She opens up about her hesitation to undergo surgery and shares a secret. Had she returned to heaven after forming Lindworm, she would have regained her full dragon form. However, she chose to live among humans and monsters, creating the city of Lindor, which translates to, "May dragons protect you." Despite her impending fate, she feels content with the life she has led. Glenn, however, reminds her of her importance to the city and its inhabitants, urging her to continue her watchful protection. He suggests that she could still enjoy life's pleasures. Moved by his words, Scotty agrees to the surgery. As the day of the operation arrives, the city holds its breath. Dr. Cthulhu explains that fire-breathing dragons possess minerals in their bodies to shield them from the heat, hence Scotty's blue blood. The surgery commences, but Scotty's body reacts. Her blood pressure spikes, and she unintentionally breathes fire. Amidst the chaos, Cthulhu and Glenn continue their work, with Cthulhu using her tentacles to hold open Scotty's organs while Glenn performs the delicate procedure. The city waits anxiously, and finally the news breaks. The surgery was a success. The city erupts in joy and relief. Scotty addresses the town, apologizing for her illness and vowing to fulfill her duties efficiently. Back at the clinic, Glenn attends to Safi, who is feeling unwell. Despite her embarrassment, Glenn insists on examining her and discovers white blisters on her tongue.
Safi, feeling shy, hides under the blankets, and Glenn leaves her to rest. Outside, Glenn stumbles upon Scotty's broken carriage. Scotty, overjoyed to see him, invites Glenn to join her in playing with her toys. Glenn, however, declines, as he has a patient to attend to. Scotty flirts with Glenn, but he gently turns her down, much to the relief of a jealous kunai. While waiting for the carriage to be fixed, Meme arrives and repairs it, revealing that her father used to make carriages. Scotty thanks Meme for fixing the carriage and for creating the needles that saved her life during the surgery. In gratitude, Scotty gifts Glenn and Meme wine barrels as tokens of thanks. Back at the clinic, Arania helps Safi change clothes, and they prepare dinner together, competing over who would be a better cook for Glenn. Meanwhile, in another part of town, the giant goddess Dione assists the villagers by removing a boulder, obstructing the water flow. In return for her help, the villagers offer her fruits, but she surprises them by gifting them a large pile of food from the mountains. In the midst of the celebration, Meme finds herself on guard duty over the wine barrels, a task that leaves her feeling a tad embarrassed given her young age. When Glenn returns, she playfully grumbles about being left alone. However, Thessalia arrives, explaining that Glenn had called her over. Thessalia and Glenn head to the clinic with their barrel, while Lorna escorts Meme and her barrel to the workshop. Back at the clinic, Safi grows anxious as Glenn's return is delayed. Arania stokes her worries, suggesting Glenn might be enjoying himself with Lulala or Cthulhu. Safi, however, defends Glenn, insisting he wouldn't do such a thing. Just then, Illy arrives with food for Glenn, a gift from the giant goddess. She decides to wait for Glenn's return. When Glenn finally arrives, he's greeted by a swarm of ladies. He opens the door to reveal an array of gifts and food left by grateful citizens. More people arrive with food to share, and the group grows larger. A feast is prepared, and everyone enjoys the meal together. The girls can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy as Glenn thanks Scotty for the evening. Scotty, usually reserved, thanks Glenn, admitting it's the first time she's interacted with so many humans and stepped out of her comfort zone.
However, Safi suddenly wraps Scotty up with her tail, scolding Glenn for being late and bringing everyone along when he finally returned. Tissalia steps in to mediate, and the girls playfully vie for Glenn's attention. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, and see you on the next video. Love you guys!